Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading another textbook cover to cover. This textbook is from 1940, and it is an American history textbook from Catholic school. So it's going to be very Christian, but it's also going to be a piece of media that gives you an idea of how children were taught during the Great Depression preceding World War II. Okay. New Spain in America. Ferdinand de Soto, a daring leader. Ferdinand de Soto was a Spanish soldier. He served under Pizarro. When Peru was conquered by de Soto, he had thrilling experiences. He was a good soldier, and he had fought bravely. After Peru was conquered, the King of Spain wished to reward de Soto. So the King of Spain made de Soto governor of Cuba. This was a good position. De Soto found the life as a governor of Cuba to be quiet. He liked the excitement. He dreamed of cities filled with treasures like those he had seen in Peru. Beautiful. The King of Spain wanted to control the land north of Mexico. He gave de Soto orders to conquer this land and to settle it. De Soto was pleased to be active again. De Soto had a party of over 600 men under his command. They were all well armed. They carried a good supply of food. The party set sail from Cuba. Before long, they reached Florida. The map on page 33 shows that Cuba is only a short distance from Florida. Look up the map if you don't know, but it is pretty close. I checked. I can verify Florida and Cuba are near. The discovery of the Mississippi River. De Soto and his men landed in Florida. They started to march overland. The journey was very unpleasant. The Spanish army had to cross many swamps. A swamp is a lowland where water does not drain away. The journey across the swamps was slow and tiresome. De Soto led the party westward beyond the swamp lands. The men reached overland for weeks. At length, they reached a mighty river. They had to halt. Here they had to halt. De Soto and his men had not yet seen any rich cities. They still hoped to find cities of wealth like De Soto had seen in Peru. He was determined that the river should not stop the march overland. Some way must be found to cross this mighty river. The men cut trees and made logs. They fastened them together to make rafts. It took months to build the needed rafts to carry the party across the wide river. Neither De Soto nor his men realized their trip across the river would later have great influence. The death of De Soto. The men were beginning to show the hardships of the journey. De Soto was losing strength. He became very weak. Realized how sick he was, the leader was dead. Before he realized how sick the leader was dead. The men wrapped his body in a blanket. Then they weighted it with sand. At night, De Soto's body was lowered into the mighty river. The men did not want Indians to know that the Spanish leader was dead. The expedition under De Soto had not found rich cities. It had discovered the Mississippi River. This event was not thought as very important at this time. The followers of De Soto were disappointed. Many of them were discouraged. Only half of the men ever got back to Cuba. Some time later, Spain realized the importance of this discovery of the mouth of the Mississippi River. Francisco Coronado. Another search for gold. Francisco Coronado undertook an expedition in the search of rich cities. 7 cities. He had heard about tales of the 7 cities. These 7 cities were said to be filled with gold and silver. These cities were supposed to be in the north of Mexico. Coronado had heard about these cities from Father Marcos, a good priest. Had gone far into the country. He wanted to tell Indians about God. Coronado led an army about 300 Spaniards. Many hundreds of Mexican Indians had also joined his expedition. Coronado led this army as far north as the present state of Kansas. On the map of page 33 shows how the route was taken by Coronado. They saw many buffalo feeding in the prairies. They failed to find any sign of the 7 cities. Coronado sent out scouting parties. One of these parties discovered the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. The Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. I like the way they say that. Because the Colorado River is like a little trickle at the bottom of the Grand Canyon or something. And I like how they say the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River, indicating that this was a river. How bizarre that must have looked. I'm sure that it was very lush, and it looked like a roaring... I can't even fathom what that looked like. I don't know what the Grand Canyon looks like in general, so it makes sense that I can't fathom it. They saw many buffalo, yada yada yada. The expeditions of De Soto and Coronado failed to add to the wealth of Spain. The Spanish began to give greater attention to settlement than for searching for gold. Most of the Spanish settlements were made in South America and in Mexico. Some Spanish settlements were made in what is now the state of California. Early Spanish missionaries spreading the gospel of Christ. It is true that some Spaniards were attracted to America by its desire to find gold. They wished to be wealthy men. This was selfish motives. Other Spaniards came to America for conquest. They wished to add to the power and glory of Spain. The land they conquered came under the rule of Spain, and the natives became Spanish subjects. There were other Spaniards who came to America. They were not interested in gold. They had no desire to conquer lands. They were earnest men who were eager to convert the Indians. They were prompted by a high spiritual motive to win souls for Christ. The Spanish priests who came to America were good men. They left the comforts of Spain and came to a wilderness. They were not interested in finding gold or becoming famous. These priests only wanted to work for for God and for His church. I'm sure that many of them were very good. They hoped to make Indians good Catholics. They wanted to show poor savages how to lead useful lives. Some of the priests were Franciscans. Some were Jesuits. There were also Dominicans and Carmelites. Now, is it fair to say that they wanted to show poor savages how to live useful lives? Well, that's probably what their perspective was, that they were poor savages, the natives. And if they had seen any human sacrifice and cannibalism, they probably would have said, these people are indeed savages, but it's not fair to lump everyone into that category. I'm sure many of them were more elevated in spiritual sense than them themselves. But some of them also were cannibals, which is not good. Tasks of the missionaries. The missionaries who came to America had many things to learn. They had to get used to living in a strange land. The climate was somewhat different, and this was often quite trying. The missionaries had to learn to prepare and eat many strange foods. The missionaries met people of a strange race, so it was necessary to learn a language of the Indians. This was no easy task. Each tribe had its own language. The Indian languages are difficult for white men to learn. These priests were zealous men. They were able to accomplish many difficult tasks and to suffer many hardships. The labor was all of the honor of the glory of God, so their reward in heaven was to be great. Father Las Casas. Bartholomew Las Casas came to America in 1502. He came here in search of wealth. Las Casas was not a man to be satisfied with mere wealth. God blessed him with a religious vocation. Vocation meaning job. Avocation meaning primary hobby. So vocation being like, if you're a car salesman, you're a salesman. That's your vocation. If you play music as a side thing, then that's your avocation. But, for everyone, it's subjective. Which one's yours? That's the question. Generally healthy to have two of those, like that, the evocation and the avocation. But you have to figure out which one's which. The good priest tried to impress upon the Indians the idea of peace. He defended the Indians wherever he could justly do so. It was Father Las Casas who persuaded the rulers of Spain to put an end to Indian slavery. Good. Father Las Casas labored 60 years for the welfare of Indians. That is why he is often called the protector of the Indians, the natives. The natives. It was an accident. We called them Indians by accident because we thought that we landed in India. I say we because I'm Italian, half. And I think that Columbus was Italian, half too. And he called them Indians, and he was wrong, and it stuck. I don't get it. Father Cancer, weird. Father Luis Cancer was a Dominican priest. He was a friend of Father Las Casas. Father Cancer came to America in 1549. He visited Florida in an attempt to convert the Indians. The Indians living in Florida were very savage. Father Cancer was scalped by the Indians and died a martyr. A person who sacrifices his life for his faith is a martyr. And scalping is when you get your skull cut so that your scalp comes off of your body. True martyrs. Many of the good missionaries who labored along the Atlantic coasts met death for their faith. The Indians along the southern coast were mostly unfriendly. They killed many missionary priests. No doubt, the martyrdom of these good priests brought many blessings for our country being the United States of America. Thank you. God bless. Goodbye.